For our next discussion, please help me welcome Dr. Joseph Aoun, President of Northeastern University, and our moderator, Dr. Amy Brand, Director and Publisher of MIT Press, for a conversation on the scientific frontier between 2025 and 2030.
Joseph, you've been a world-renowned leader on innovation and education for a long time, and back in 2017, we, the MIT Press, published your book, Robot Proof: Higher Education in the Age of AI. What prompted you at that time to write the book?
Let me start by saying that I had the opportunity and the honor to lecture in Ash Carter's class, and he told me something that stayed with me, and I'm sure you heard it before. He said that innovation is, and technology, more importantly, is unstoppable, but it's shapeable. And there are two ways of shaping the advances of technologies. One is to look at technology per se, and the other is to look at the implication of technology on human beings. So if I look at it as an educator from this perspective, and if I look at what we do in universities and how we deal with knowledge, we looked at knowledge along three dimensions. We want to understand the physical world and explain it. We want to understand life and explain it. And the third is we want to understand social interaction and explain it. And obviously, the interaction between those three dimensions. For the first time, we saw that there is a new dimension, the AI dimension, the digital dimension. It's a new world that has agency and that has some autonomy. So the whole idea is how to integrate then, in our educational mission, the fourth dimension, the fourth world, and look and help explain to our students, the implications of this world. So that's how it all started.
Mm-hmm. And you recently updated the book, and we published a revised edition since we're showing books, yeah. And this is a wonderful one. What has changed in the intervening 7 years?
What has changed is something that we all know, is LLM. AI didn't start yesterday. It didn't start with LLM. It started 70 years ago. However, with LLM and generative models, we saw more powerful tools. They are working by brute force. Those tools are very powerful, and at the same time, they have limitations. And we all think, and Eric Schmidt himself thinks, that in the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to reach something called singularity, where essentially they surpass human competence and be completely autonomous. In fact, I don't believe it's going to happen in the next 10 years for a simple reason. There are three limitations that we see. LLM models do not have common sense yet. They do not have logic. And more importantly, they don't understand context. So that's what happens. So the whole idea then is, yes, we have this powerful tool that is now at the forefront of what we do at all levels. And this powerful tool has enormous implications for higher education. For instance, you heard Eric mention an app that will be multilingual. What does it mean? It means that it's very simple. It means that knowledge is becoming a commodity. Experience is not. Therefore, you have to rethink your educational mission along these lines.
Yeah, and you've written a lot about experiential learning, about lifelong learning, as an imperative for developing world-class talent. Is that really what we need to stay competitive in the AI economy?
Look, the mission of the university now is to help people become what I call the robot-proof. And being robot-proof is a lifelong journey. As an undergrad, you have to master what we call humanics. And what is humanics? Humanics is the integration of three literacies: the AI literacy and tech literacy, understanding how they function; data literacy, namely the product of the tech and AI; and the third is a human literacy. And that's the ability that we have that machines have not duplicated yet. I already mentioned one. We we know context, and we know something more than about context. We can take our knowledge from a domain and transpose it to another in a context completely different. We can take our experience from a domain and transpose it to a domain that's different, and that's something that machines cannot duplicate. So what I said, what we call is that every learner coming out of a university at the undergraduate level has to master what we call humanics, namely the integration of 3 literacies. And that's not enough. The other aspect is you have to put it in practice in an experiential setting through co-ops, internships, etc., activities that will allow you to understand others, to work in teams, to understand how, if I look at the audience, I look at their body language, are they with me or not, and have cultural agility, have creativity, have entrepreneurship, and also transfer your knowledge from a domain to another. Let me give you an example. For instance, we had a student, and I'm taking this example because I happen to like it, a student that was doing her co-op internship in Bosnia. And she was a student of English, undergrad, and they had snipers. And the snipers were saying that fake news, that this bridge or this road is safe, and they were killing people. So she worked with an NGO there, and she devised by herself a program that will debunk this fake news and at the same time tell people immediately, what's happening, don't trust the fact that this road is safe, etc. So when you ask her, how can a student of English doing something like that, what did you do? She said, in English, what we do is deconstruct a text. So that's what I have been doing, deconstructed the text, and then apply it in a different way. That's something that machines, that's called with learning sciences, file transfer, that's what machines cannot do. So essentially what we are saying that in our educational mission, we need every student to master humanics, the 3 literacies, put them in practice in order to discover them, themselves, but also to start honing their uniquely human skills. Yeah. And the third aspect, saying that's not enough. That's not enough. Why? Because we all are becoming obsolete. Why? Because we heard knowledge is moving fast. Therefore, we need to integrate lifelong learning. And from this perspective, we in higher education looked at lifelong learning as a second-class operation or an ancillary operation. Whereas now, if you look at what's happening in the United States, we have a shrinking number of students going to college, 18 to 22, for different reasons, including the fact that we're aging. But at the same time, the demand is for lifelong learning. Right. So our mission is education and research, producing knowledge. And from this perspective, our mission is not to educate 18 to 22, but to educate people for life. Right. And therefore, we need to integrate lifelong learning. And that's, in a way, a national imperative for competitiveness. Because if you look at, for instance, the discussions that Eric had and all the discussions, the human factor is essential in competing with other nations. And, if people are becoming obsolete, if, the various studies are projecting that 50% of the people at work, etc., are going to, see their work disappear, then lifelong learning has to be integrated. And there are ways of doing it, not only for universities, but for the government and states. Singapore is giving every citizen a lifelong learning account. The UK is saying every company of a certain size must put 0.5 percentage point of their payroll to retool and reskill and upskill and help people reinvent themselves. Yeah. So that's essentially the picture. The picture is robot-proof is a lifelong learning endeavor. Start with humanics, experiential, and lifelong learning has to be integrated in whatever we do as citizens, and universities have to do it.
I love that story you told about the student relative to fake news and misinformation. So this is a conference about innovation and national security. And in 2024, the World Economic Forum identified misinformation and disinformation as our greatest near-term risk. So how are we preparing our students to, use and to some extent compete with, and also not be deceived by the latest generation of artificial intelligences?
Well, this is not only for how we preparing our students, but how are we working in society to help with this phenomenon. And essentially, clearly, the students have to be educated and work on this aspect. We have centers, we have various activities focusing essentially on that will allow them to integrate and work on fake news and how to learn how to debunk fake news along similar lines that this student was able to debunk fake news by herself. But those will be catalysts that will allow them to do it. At the same time, there are policy implications, and we're working with Washington on that. So we have a responsibility in higher education to focus on that. And, and also, frankly, this is, part of something more general. How do you approach the innovation from an ethical perspective? Because with AI, the phenomenon is going to be and is being even magnified even more and accelerated. So that's what's being done.
So just a little bit more of a personal question. I mean, you and I both studied formal linguistics with Noam Chomsky. How has that form of study, that form of science, influenced you or taught you anything about solving big problems?
Well, essentially, language is a uniquely human property. At the same time, we did, as we know, formal linguistics, mathematical modeling, machine learning. We were at the intersection of machine learning, cognitive neurosciences. So that's a domain that we were very versed on. And that's why I think that for the time being, when you look at LLM models are working by brute force. They're not really models of natural language processing, even though they're extremely powerful. The next steps is going to involve integrating more algorithms that will allow people to, or allow machines to look at language models from then that would be more similar to the human perspective too. But also, I heard Eric mention something about the competition with China. It's interesting what happened with the competition with China with respect to AI. They also moved in, after the fact, that they were not accessing the most powerful chips. They started working on small language models that will allow them to access, to work on very specific language models, whether they're in health or whether they are in various subdomains, and those allow them to move forward and compete with us without using the same energy and without requiring more chips. So once again, I mean, the bottom line is the following. Ultimately, the competition is there. The competition is not going to be focused on restrictions only, but on the human factor. And that's something that is very relevant. We need more people in STEM. We need more engineering, et cetera. If you look at studies, the various studies saying, no, we have enough. But if you look at it from a comparative perspective, we don't have that. And so we need a system. The feeder system, the K through 12, is not giving us enough STEM people. At the same time, we have a situation that is paradoxical and not working. We educate people, they want to stay in the States, and we send them overseas. I came here like Nubar as an immigrant, and that doesn't make sense. So we're feeding the competition in that way.
I'm glad you brought up what you're seeing in terms of trends in majors and concentrations of students. I mean, are we producing enough expertise to remain a global leader in science?
We are a global leader in science,
We are
as
now.
you said.
Yeah,
we
over the
are.
next
We have
5
something
years.
going,
Yeah.
and that's essential because AI has not started with OpenAI or Google or Meta. It started in universities, and they took it, and as they should have, and applied it. That's the work. It's, higher education will take it to a certain level, then industry will take it beyond. And now they are in a situation where they are doing things that we cannot do in higher education because of the cost. So, we have certain advantages that you don't find in other nations worldwide. First, we have an open system. An open system in what way? Our open higher education system. We recruit talent from all over the world and, at the faculty level. We also attract talent from all over the world at the student level. But now we have to keep them and retain them. One of the previous directors of the National Science Foundation told me that every student, who's finishing in a degree in STEM should receive a diploma and a green card. We don't do that, okay? So the third aspect is that, our system is not only open at this level, but also we don't believe in seniority. So, and that's something that I didn't find anywhere else. So that means that if you have a young assistant professor or a young student who is coming up with an innovation or a discovery, they are moved forward. Whereas in other places you have to wait and so that the person, the senior person retires in order to take his place. What I also am seeing that universities are now way more receptive to working at 2 levels. One is to help the faculty start companies, but also universities have not been very receptive in working with the Department of Defense, even though historically we receive in universities a lot of support, grants from the Department of Defense and DARPA. But now I see a shift. For instance, in my own university, we created a campus in Burlington and another in Arlington focusing on security research. That's something that has not been traditionally the case with universities because they want to keep it at arm's length, as you know.
Yeah.
Where,
Well, MIT would be a bit of an exception.
No, not even MIT, not even our alma mater. Why? Because essentially, over the years, MIT had to farm it to create a separate entity for that. So if you want to look at competition and look at security, security has to be something that, universities are focusing on health, security, sustainability, correct? So if security is really a domain that we want to focus on in terms of research, I'm simplifying here in terms of foci, but how are we going to approach security?
Yeah.
And that's something we have to have a robust discussion about.
Another trend that I'm seeing, I was at a conference out on the West Coast last week that was largely about FROs, focused research organizations, and a lot of very wealthy individuals have set up research institutes. The idea that we need to accelerate research to solve the most pressing global problems, and there's friction within the university when you think about the incentive for researchers. They have to teach, they have to write grants. How do you see? What's your response to a research system that's also developing outside of the university?
That's good. We live in a competitive world.
Yeah.
No one has a monopoly of anything. Universities are facing a wake-up call now because knowledge is becoming a commodity. But research is not something that is a monopoly of universities. As a matter of fact, I was talking to Nubar, let me pick on him a little bit, and he's telling me that he is working with Microsoft in order to have research done without researchers. It's a research project. We're not there yet. But if this is the case, so you have research being done without people, At the same time, knowledge is becoming a commodity that you have access. So what's the role of universities from this perspective? And that's a fascinating challenge for us. I think there are answers, but we have to confront that. Whereas we have been more or less coasting from saying it's business as usual. We have done it for thousands of years, and we're going to continue to do the same. I don't think it's going to work.
Well, from the perspective of a publisher, I certainly think about knowledge as a commodity, and also that the mission of the academy is not only about research and teaching, but also the compact with the public to share the fruits of that research.
More than sharing the fruit of the research, you mentioned we have a social compact with society.
Yes.
And because of this social compact, we have enormous privileges. For instance, we operate in a world where we receive grants from the federal government to support our students and also for research. At the same time, with philanthropy, we were discussing philanthropy. If somebody is giving you support, that's tax deductible. That's also a privilege. Now what we are seeing is that this compact with society is being challenged. People are skeptical about higher education. So higher education has a role to play in reaffirming its relevance, but also if we look at it from a competitive perspective, a national security perspective, more important. Imagine a world without universities. Will we be able to compete at a global level?
I don't think so. So what does, from the lens of security, the global race for AI, what lessons does it offer U.S. universities?
This is not the first global competition and not the last global competition. I think that we, as Eric said, we were almost like, to take the example of AI again, we are very, China and the United States, we are very close now in terms of the race. 1-2 years, he said, maybe 3 years, it doesn't. It's more important than ever to have the triangle involving universities, companies, and government working together on this national competition. And frankly, we haven't put a real blueprint for that yet. And because essentially universities work well with businesses, and with some limits. They work well with government, and we benefit a lot from government. But the opportunity, I think, is to put the three together, not only in terms of research, but also in having a national blueprint for how we can remain competitive at the human level. With AI, many people will become obsolete, as I mentioned. How are we going to move a large part of society to remain relevant and to reinvent itself? It's not easy.
No.
And that's a role where, we all have to play together.
You have had a relatively long tenure as a university president. I mean, almost 20 years. That's exceptional in this day and age. And so you've seen the impact of evolution and technology on education. And, one thing I think everybody would like to hear is what you see in the 5 years ahead, or what do you see on the horizon in education and technological innovation?
Yeah, and look, the higher education system in the United States is facing an enormous challenge. We are seeing many colleges and universities going under. We are seeing also wave of mergers and acquisitions, etc. This is something that we haven't seen before. And also at the same time, we are seeing that there are less students going to college because of this aging population that we talked about. And at the same time, because of the skepticism about higher education. 8 years ago, 69% of college-bound students used to go to college, namely those who finished high school. Now it's 62%. So if you look at it, Higher education is being challenged dramatically, and especially it started with small colleges. Now it's moving to the third tier, and we are seeing people having less, students, and even at universities that are well known. That has implications for society, as I mentioned, because if our system is unique in the world. Our educational system is unique in the world because it's extremely diverse. And we don't have a minister of education telling us that's what you should work on, and that's what you should teach, and that's what you should research. But so essentially, we have a system that with small colleges, large colleges, private, public, that is extremely diverse and extremely competitive. So if it starts being challenged, that's not good for our society. So headwinds moving forward for higher education. At the same time, it's an opportunity for higher education to say, okay, why do I exist? And for every institution, not at a macro level, what is my differentiation? Why would I attract students? What kind of research I'm going to focus on? And at the same time, collaboration, as I mentioned, between universities, with industry, with government, is going to be more essential than ever in order to assert this relevance. So this notion of a campus that is closed is going to disappear. And, and those who are going to keep a campus confined to its geographical footprint are going to be challenged, no matter what.
So, you spoke about the trends that we're seeing in higher ed, some colleges closing, whereas we look at Northeastern and it's been this incredible success story when you think about how you've turned that university around, grown it, made it a lot more competitive from an admissions perspective. What has been at the core of that success?
What has been at the core of that is build a differentiation with impact. So we have a system of experiential education. So at the time when, as I mentioned, knowledge is becoming a commodity, experience is not. So focus on that. We have co-op, which are long-term internships in 146 countries. We have 4,700 partners worldwide. We also built a system of a network of campuses for lifelong learning, precisely to allow, because essentially when you start into focusing on lifelong learning, it's people like us. We're busy, we don't have time, so you have to go to them. You don't expect them to come to the university, you want the university to go to them. That's why we are in the UK, in Canada, and the United States for lifelong learning. So that's the idea, and then for research, it's the same thing. Focus on domains, assume leadership, and be translational from this perspective, and work with other universities, work with the companies, and work with the government. So that's, and choose your domains, make a bet on emerging opportunities, and go for that.
And so from this position of an incredible career and presidency, seeing Northeastern grow, thinking so creatively about preparing students for the AI economy, the workforce of the future, what would you like to see as your, crowning legacy in this position?
I don't believe in legacy.
Okay.
I don't believe in legacy because essentially, actually, I was discussing that with Nobar. Once again, I'm picking on him, but it's very difficult to ensure a legacy. What you want is to make sure that you are providing intergenerational opportunities and leave the institution in better shape, and that's it. Because your successors are going to take it in completely different directions and give them opportunities. So think about opportunities, think about legacies, and that's essentially what you said at the beginning, Stephanie, about and that's what Secretary Carter was focusing on, is the future.
Yeah. From my perspective, running a university press, I'm thinking a lot about the future of knowledge. On the one hand, we're all accessing information and creating different information in different ways, and yet I've never been to a talk about AI that doesn't involve reference to many books, including Kissinger's and Schmidt's. I would love to know what you think the information industry should be doing to support a new era of educating, of reaching out to the public.
We were discussing that a little bit
Yeah.
at the beginning. The young generations, people say they don't focus on information. That's not true.
They're
They
not
focus
reading
on,
as much,
They,
yeah.
they focus on information. They get information, but they get from different sources. So therefore, the question becomes, how can we use their media, the medias that they use, whether, don't laugh at it, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, etc., to convey the information, the knowledge, and also turn it into a vector of discussion rather than a vector of uniformity. And that's what's happening today.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you for this conversation. I have learned a lot, and I hope the audience has as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.